The city glittered below, a sprawling galaxy of indifferent lights. From her 40th floor office, Amelia Sterling could see it all. A kingdom she had built from glass and steel and sheer, unyielding will. Yet the panoramic view offered no comfort. It was a sterile vista, as silent and empty as the space in her chest where a heart was supposed to be. The polished mahogany of her desk was cold beneath her fingertips, a perfect mirror for the woman who sat behind it. Successful, powerful, and profoundly alone. This was her fortress, designed to keep the world out, and it had worked all too well. The sharp ring of her private line sliced through the silence. She glanced at the caller ID, and a familiar ice trickled into her veins. Marcus Thorne. Working late, Leah? His voice was a silken blade, dripping with the false familiarity he no longer had any right to use. You always did love the view from the top. Pity it must be so lonely. Amelia's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want, Marcus? Just calling to congratulate you on the Q3 numbers. Impressive. It'll make the acquisition that much sweeter, he chuckled. A low, predatory sound. My board sends their regards. They can't wait to welcome you? To a much smaller office, of course. The taunt landed like a physical blow, stirring the ghosts of a betrayal that had nearly shattered her years ago. Her breath hitched. You will never have this company. We'll see, he purred and hung up. A tremor of rage and remembered pain shot through her. She slammed the phone down, her hand shaking. In her fury, she knocked a silver frame from the corner of her desk. It hit the marble floor with a sickening crack, the glass splintering into a dozen jagged pieces around a photo of a younger, smiling Amelia, a woman she barely recognized. She stared at the wreckage, a perfect metaphor for her life. That's when the door creaked open. A man in a gray janitor's uniform stood in the doorway, a small boy half hidden behind his legs. He held a cleaning cart, his expression one of gentle apology. Sorry, Miss Sterling. Didn't realize you were still here. Amelia's voice was sharp, brittle. The building is supposed to be empty. Just finishing up this floor, the man said, his voice calm and steady. He had kind eyes that seemed to absorb her hostility without reflecting it. The little boy peeked out, his own eyes wide and curious. My son, Leo. Sitter canceled last minute. Amelia's gaze was dismissive. She gestured impatiently at the broken frame. Just clean that up. She turned her back on them, facing the cold window again, the conversation with Marcus replaying in her mind. She heard the quiet sweep of a dustpan, the soft clink of glass. When the sound stopped, the man's voice came again, softer this time. A bad break can always be mended, he said quietly. The glass maybe not, but the frame can be. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge him. She just waited until the soft click of the door told her she was alone once more, left with the echo of his unexpected kindness and the silent judgment of the glittering, empty city. The next evening, Amelia found herself lingering, an unfamiliar reluctance to go home pulling at her. She told herself it was work, a counter-strategy to Marcus's takeover bid, but a deeper part of her knew she was waiting. Right on schedule, the door opened, and David entered, Leo trailing behind him like a quiet shadow. This time, the boy stepped forward, his small hand outstretched. He held a single piece of the broken mahogany frame. It was no longer jagged. He had sanded the edges down until they were perfectly smooth, the wood warm and polished from his efforts. He placed it carefully on her desk without a word, then retreated to his father's side. Amelia stared at the piece of wood. Such a small, simple gesture. In her world, gestures were grand and transactional, stock options, leveraged buyouts, strategic partnerships. This was different. It was pure, uncalculated kindness. She looked up at David, who simply gave her a small, understanding nod. He likes to fix things, David explained softly. Amelia cleared her throat, the unaccustomed feeling of gratitude making her voice tight. Thank you, Leo. The boy offered a shy smile, his eyes bright. It was the beginning of a silent conversation, a tentative bridge being built across the chasm of their different worlds. She started staying late every night. The official reason was the looming threat of Marcus, but the truth was found in the quiet comfort of their nightly ritual. She learned Leo loved to draw and bought him a professional-grade sketchbook and a set of vibrant colored pencils. The next morning, a drawing was waiting on her desk. A woman with fiery red hair standing atop a tall building, with a smiling sun shining down on her. She found herself asking David questions, first about Leo, then about him. He spoke of his son with a gentle, fierce pride that resonated with something dormant in Amelia. He never complained about his circumstances, never betrayed a hint of bitterness. He simply was a man of profound integrity, mopping floors in a building owned by a woman who had forgotten what integrity felt like. One night, a thunderstorm rolled over the city, lashing rain against the panoramic windows. The lights in the office flickered and died, plunging the 40th floor into an eerie darkness, illuminated only by the strobing flashes of lightning. A jolt of panic, primal and cold, seized Amelia. She hated storms. They reminded her of the night Marcus had walked out, taking her trust, her love, and the source code to their first company with him. "It's just a breaker." David's voice cut through the darkness, calm and reassuring. He was there, a steady presence she hadn't even heard enter. "I'll check the panel. Stay put." He moved with a quiet confidence, his footsteps sure in the dark. A few minutes later, the emergency lights hummed to life, casting a dim, intimate glow over the office. He returned to find her standing by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass like tears. "You okay?" he asked gently. She didn't answer at first, lost in the memory. Then the words came, a torrent she couldn't stop. "I built something once," she whispered, her voice raw, "with someone I trusted. I poured everything I had into it. My ideas, my money, my heart. I thought we were building a future. But when the storm came, he took the foundation and left me in the rubble." She didn't name Marcus, didn't give the sordid details. She just shared the ache of the wound itself. "I learned then that you can't trust anyone. You can only build walls high enough so they can't hurt you again." David didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. He simply stood beside her, his silence a vessel for her pain. "Walls keep you safe," he said after a long moment, his gaze fixed on the storm outside. "But they also keep you a prisoner. A garden can't grow if you lock out the sun and the rain." His simple analogy struck a chord deep within her. For the first time in years, she felt a crack in the wall she had so carefully constructed. She felt seen not as the formidable CEO, but as a person who was hurting. In the dim, storm-lit office, with the scent of rain and floor wax in the air, a fragile seed of trust began to take root. Their routine deepened into a quiet friendship. Amelia looked forward to the end of the day, not for the reprieve from work, but for the peaceful interlude when David and Leo arrived. She would share her takeout dinner, and they would sit in her vast office, the three of them a strange and unlikely constellation. Leo, still silent, filled his sketchbook with vibrant images of his world. His father, the city skyline, and more frequently, Amelia. His drawings were his voice, and they spoke of a growing affection that warmed her in a way no corporate victory ever could. One evening, she found David not on her floor, but in the building's cavernous maintenance room. The air was thick with the smell of oil and old machinery. He was bent over a large, ornate grandfather clock, its face cracked and its hands frozen. Its intricate brass gears and weights were laid out on a workbench with surgical precision. "I didn't know you were a horologist," Amelia said, her voice echoing slightly in the large space. David looked up, a smudge of grease on his cheek. He smiled. "Hardly. The building manager was going to throw it out. Seemed a shame. Something this complex just needs patience, a steady hand." He picked up a tiny gear with a pair of tweezers. "I used to be a mechanical engineer. Designed engines for a small aerospace firm." Amelia was stunned. The quiet janitor who cleaned her office had a mind capable of designing the machines that conquered gravity. "What happened?" she asked. the question slipping out before she could stop it. His smile faded slightly, replaced by a soft, melancholic shadow. "Life happened," he said simply, his eyes flickering towards the doorway as if expecting Leo to appear. He didn't elaborate and she didn't press. But the knowledge recontextualized everything. His quiet dignity wasn't resignation. It was a choice. He was a man who had sacrificed a dream for a reason she didn't yet understand, and she respected him for it more than any CEO she'd ever met. She began visiting him in the maintenance room, watching him work on the clock. It became their sanctuary, a place away from the sterile pressures of her world. Surrounded by tools and the quiet hum of the building's heart, they talked. She told him of her ambitions, the fire that drove her to succeed. He spoke of the simple, profound joy of watching his son grow, of finding beauty in a perfectly balanced gear or a well-sanded piece of wood. He was teaching her a language she'd forgotten, the language of simple, tangible things. The warmth of a shared coffee, the satisfaction of a mended object, the unspoken comfort of a trusted presence. The neglected garden of her heart, as he had called it, was beginning to feel the first rays of a hesitant sun. The fear of Marcus's takeover still loomed, but it no longer felt like the end of the world. It felt like a problem to be solved, not a verdict on her life. Because now, her life was becoming about more than just her company. It was becoming about a little boy's drawings and a quiet man who was patiently teaching a broken clock how to tell time again. The question of Leo's silence had lingered in the back of Amelia's mind, a mystery she felt she had no right to probe. But one rainy evening, in the sanctuary of the maintenance room, the courage came. The half-assembled clock stood between them, a testament to David's patient skill. "David," she began softly, "you don't have to answer, but, Leo, why doesn't he speak?" David set down a small screwdriver, his hands falling still. He stared at the intricate clockwork for a long moment, his broad shoulders slumping just slightly. When he finally looked at her, his eyes held a universe of pain, held in check by a powerful, quiet love. His mother, Sarah, she was an artist, he began, his voice thick with memory. She saw color and light in everything. She was the one who gave Leo his first sketchbook. They were coming home from a class one afternoon, 2 years ago. A truck ran a red light. Sarah, she didn't make it. Leo was in the car with her. The paramedics said he was conscious the whole time. He just stopped talking that day. The doctors called it selective mutism, a cage made of trauma. Amelia's heart constricted. The weight of his sacrifice crashed down on her with breathtaking force. "The engineering job." He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I couldn't travel anymore. Couldn't work the long, unpredictable hours. Leo needed me, every minute. This job," he gestured around the utilitarian room. "The hours are steady. I can bring him with me when I have to. He's my world." Amelia. There wasn't a choice to make. The simple, profound truth of his statement hung in the air. He had given up his passion, his career, without a second thought, for his son. It was a love so pure and absolute it felt sacred. At that moment, Amelia knew the feeling growing inside her wasn't just respect or friendship. It was something deeper, something terrifying and beautiful. The next day, the threat that had been simmering on the horizon boiled over. An alert flashed on her screen. Thorn Industries initiates hostile takeover bid for Sterling Corp. Marcus wasn't just threatening her anymore. He was making his move. The news was a shockwave through the company. Her phone rang incessantly with calls from panicked board members and opportunistic journalists. Marcus had begun his attack, spreading poison. Rumors that she was an unstable leader, that the company's success was a fluke. He was coming for her legacy, for the last thing she had built to protect herself. The walls were being besieged. Marcus, never one for subtlety, demanded a face-to-face meeting. He strode into her office with the same arrogant swagger she remembered, a wolf circling the territory he believed was his. He looked her over, his eyes cold and assessing, lingering for a moment on the small, colorful drawing from Leo that was now taped to her computer monitor. "Charming decor, Leah," he sneered. really softens the corporate image. He settled into the chair opposite her, a picture of smug triumph. Let's not waste time. My offer is generous, more than you deserve. Take the buyout. Walk away with your dignity intact. There is nothing dignified about surrendering to a thief, Amelia said, her voice dangerously calm. Marcus laughed. Still so self-righteous. You built this place on my ashes? Or have you forgotten? This is just balancing the scales. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You can't win. Your board is already wavering. I've spoken to them. They see you for what you are. A brilliant mind, but alone. And no one who is alone can hold an empire. His words were crafted to hit her where she was most vulnerable. As he stood to leave, the timing was cruelly perfect. David and Leo were in the hallway, quietly buffing the floor. Marcus paused, his lip curling in disdain as he looked from the man in the janitor's uniform to the silent child. The help, he said loud enough for everyone to hear, his gaze fixed on Amelia. It's good to see you're still keeping company with the people who know their place. It suits you. The insult was a poisoned dart aimed at her, but it struck David and Leo. She saw David's shoulders tense, his hand moving instinctively to rest on Leo's back. Rage, pure and hot, flared in Amelia's chest. This wasn't about business anymore. Marcus hadn't just attacked her company. He had desecrated the one pure, good thing that had entered her life. He had mocked the man whose integrity dwarfed his own 1,000 times over. The battle lines had been redrawn. The pressure was immense. Marcus's smear campaign was working. Her CFO, a man she had trusted for a decade, sat in her office, his face grim. Amelia, the board is getting cold feet. Thorne's offer is financially sound. If we fight this and lose, the stock will plummet, and we'll be left with nothing. Taking the deal is the smart play. It secures your fortune. His words echoed Marcus's logic, the cold, transactional calculus that had governed her entire life. For a moment, the old Amelia, the one who built walls, resurfaced. Fear whispered in her ear. Marcus was right. She was alone. Who was she to fight an empire? The weight of the decision crushed her. She retreated into herself, working with a frantic, desperate energy, fueled by coffee and fear. When David and Leo appeared at her door that evening, she barely looked up. I'm busy, she said, her voice clipped and distant. Leo held out a new drawing, a lion standing protectively over a lioness, but Amelia waved it away. Not now, Leo. The hurt in the little boy's eyes was a physical blow, but she couldn't stop. She was shutting them out, pushing away the very light she had just begun to let in. The fortress was being rebuilt, stone by painful stone. David watched her for a long moment, his expression a mixture of concern and sorrow. He quietly guided Leo out of the room, leaving Amelia to the cold company of her spreadsheets and her mounting despair. She was trapped, caught between the ghost of the woman she had been and the hope of the woman she could be. The choice was hers. Secure her gilded cage or risk everything for a garden she had only just begun to tend. The morning of the board meeting arrived with a sense of finality. A heavy, oppressive gray sky hung over the city, mirroring the dread in Amelia's heart. She had spent the night staring at two documents on her screen, Marcus's buyout offer and her own defiant, long-shot counterproposal. She still hadn't decided which path to take. As she stood, straightening the jacket of her power suit, her armor, a strange, acrid smell tickled her nose. Smoke. A piercing shriek from the fire alarm shattered the morning calm. Panic erupted in the hallway. Shouts, the sound of running feet. Amelia pulled open her office door to a wall of thick, black smoke. The server room. Fire here now. It was a cruel, absurd twist of fate. The smoke was disorienting, clawing at her throat. She stumbled back into her office, slamming the door shut, but the toxic fumes were already pouring in from under the door and through the vents. Her eyes watered, her lungs burned. She dropped to the floor, crawling toward the window, but her head was swimming. The city outside began to blur. Her last coherent thought was one of bitter irony. To have fought so hard, only to be taken down by a simple electrical fire. Meanwhile, on a lower floor, David smelled the smoke and his instincts took over. He knew the building's schematics by heart, knew its every secret passage and vulnerability. He heard the announcement for a full evacuation, but one thought consumed him. Amelia, the 40th floor. He sent Leo with a trusted security guard, promising he would be right back, and then he ran, not away from the danger, but straight into its heart. He took the emergency stairs, his legs pumping, his lungs straining. He reached the executive floor to find it choked with a blinding, black fog. He tied a wet rag from his cart around his face and plunged in, guided by memory. He found Amelia's office door, the handle hot to the touch. It was locked. Without hesitation, he threw his shoulder against it. Once, twice, the wood groaning in protest. On the third try, the lock splintered, and the door flew open. Amelia was on the floor, barely conscious. He scooped her into his arms, her body limp, and turned back into the inferno. He navigated the hallway by touch, his lungs screaming for air, his only focus the precious weight in his arms. He burst out into the chaos of the building's lobby, which was filled with firefighters, paramedics, and the entire evacuated staff of Sterling Corporation. He gently laid Amelia down just as a medical team rushed forward with an oxygen mask and a stretcher. At the edge of the crowd, Amelia saw Marcus, looking on not with concern, but with cold, reptilian annoyance at the disruption. Just then, Leo broke free from the security guard and ran to her side. He had seen his father emerge from the smoke, a hero. He saw the woman who had shown him such kindness lying pale and still. The dam of his trauma, the cage of his silence, finally broke. He grabbed Amelia's limp hand, his small face etched with terror and love. "Amelia," he cried out, his voice raspy from disuse, but startlingly clear. "Amelia." The word, his first in 2 years, was a miracle. It cut through the haze of smoke and confusion, reaching Amelia as she gasped for breath. Her eyes fluttered open. She saw David, his face covered in soot, his eyes filled with a fierce, protective love. She saw Leo, his face streaked with tears, his voice a beacon. And she saw Marcus, a spectator to a humanity he could never comprehend. In that single, clarifying moment, the world came into focus. The choice was no longer a choice. It was an imperative. Her fortune meant nothing. Her company meant nothing. This was everything. 1 week later, Amelia Sterling walked into her boardroom. She was not the same woman who had left it. The fire had burned away the last vestiges of her fear, leaving behind a core of unshakable conviction. She looked at the anxious faces of her board members, then at the empty chair where Marcus's proxy would have Saturday. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I am rejecting Marcus Thorne's offer." A murmur went through the room. "I am rejecting it because this company was not built on compromise. It was built on innovation, on integrity, and on the belief that our greatest asset is our people." She didn't stop there. She laid bare Marcus's history of unethical practices, presenting a dossier of evidence she had compiled years ago but had been too afraid to use. Then, she unveiled her new vision. Not just a counteroffer, but a revolution. A new R&D division focused on sustainable technology, a massive investment in employee wellness and profit sharing, and a commitment to community outreach. "Sterling Corp will no longer be just a monument to my own ambition," she declared. "It will be a testament to what we can build together." Inspired by her passion and the now legendary story of her rescue, the board voted unanimously in her favor. They didn't just save her company. They chose to believe in her, and in her new, better vision. Her first act as the reaffirmed CEO was to walk down to the maintenance room. David was there, quietly cleaning his tools, ready to go back to being invisible. Leo sat at the workbench, drawing. "David," Amelia said, her heart full, "I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything," he said, not looking up from his work. "You're right," she agreed. "I don't owe you, but I want to offer you something. A job." I'm starting a new division. I need a brilliant engineer, a man with a steady hand and the patience to fix what's broken, to lead it. David finally looked at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. Amelia, I'm a janitor. No, she said, stepping closer. You're the man who saved my life. You're the man who reminded me how to live it. And you're the best engineer I've ever known. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. And Leo, I think the head of R&D should have an office big enough for an in-house artist. Leo looked up from his drawing and gave her a smile so bright it could have powered the entire city. David stared at her, a slow, wondrous dawn of hope spreading across his face. He nodded, unable to speak. In the quiet of the workshop, surrounded by broken things waiting to be mended, they began to build their future. 1 year later, the sun streamed into a lush backyard, illuminating a garden bursting with life. Roses, lavender, and sunflowers grew in a riot of color where once there had been only weeds and barren earth. Amelia, her hands covered in soil, laughed as Leo, now a talkative, endlessly curious 8-year-old, explained the intricate social structure of an ant colony he discovered. David came out of the back door, carrying a tray with 3 glasses of lemonade, a comfortable, domestic smile on his face. He handed her a glass, his fingers brushing against hers. The simple touch sent a current of warmth through her. Inside the house, on the mantelpiece of the warm, lived-in living room, the old grandfather clock from the maintenance room stood proudly, its polished brass pendulum swinging in a steady, peaceful rhythm. Tick, tock, it was keeping perfect time. Amelia looked at the thriving garden, at the chattering boy, at the loving man by her side. She had lost a corporate battle years ago and nearly lost her company again. But she had won the only thing that mattered. She realized that true wealth was never about the numbers on a balance sheet. It was about the quiet work of restoration. It was about nurturing a neglected garden back to life, mending the intricate gears of a broken heart, and finding a home in the steady, unwavering love of a family you chose, a family who would walk through fire for you, and then help you plant flowers in the ashes.